We all knew we were doing something, you know, even though we didn't discuss it, I think we all knew that we were doing something quite unique at the time.
It's a film of a particular moment, a film of a particular zeitgeist, and it isn't something that can be duplicated.
The whole experience of editing My Own Private Idaho was the greatest experience I've had creatively as a filmmaker.
Malinocha was sort of the first thing he did that got him some, you know, industry notice. He wanted to do My Own Private Idaho right after he did Malinocha. And I think when he started to have the chance to talk to agents and to talk to people in Hollywood, you know, have an audience with people that could fund movies in Hollywood, that was the first thing he pitched. And I think they said, what else do you have? And he also had this thing that was sort of in his back pocket called Drugstore Cowboy. And Drugstore Cowboy was, you know, they said, no, you know, forget the gay hustler thing. Let's, you know, how about the Drugstore Cowboy? So, and that got produced first.
Drugstore Cowboy was hugely important for me as a designer. I don't know that I was 100% confident at the beginning of Drugstore Cowboy that he could pull off the oddball juxtapositions there, that he could make a movie about junkies and get away with it in Hollywood when you're not allowed to do that. But he'd proved to me and everybody else that he could.
When Drugstore Cowboy had the success it did, I think he had more choices, and he was able to do, you know, this gave him a chance to do My Own Private Idaho, which he was aching to do. So he was able to sort of come home to Portland, come home to where he was, and make this regional film, and you know, be left alone to some extent and hire the people that he wanted to work with.
He was very eager to go back to Portland and work the way he had on Malinoche. And his idea was that he was going to make this film for under $500,000 with local kids in Portland. So he was very excited and talked about it. And at the same time, he was sort of fantasizing about his dream cast and, well, who knows what's going to happen with this film Drugstore Cowboy, and probably nobody's going to be interested, but at least it'll give me a chance to do My Own Private Idaho.
Never any doubt in my mind that what the script was trying to do was a profoundly wise thing. I still feel like that script is one of the dozen best scripts I've ever read in my life. The script was defiantly off the charts. The script was going into territory that scripts don't go. They didn't go in those years. And I mean, this really, at this point, you really have to scratch to think of other films that anybody saw that really had a gay theme and weren't sort of pandering. So everybody knew that we were out on a limb, we were exposed. There was the sort of comfort of having Gus's success with Drugstore Cowboy behind us. Everybody kind of already got it, that Gus was smarter than everybody else and he could do things that other people couldn't do and get away with it and really sort of thrill the audience. With My Own Private Idaho, we were pushing it much further thematically, much further in terms of sexuality, and we were equipped with the sort of strength of Gus's success the first time around, but we also knew we were exposed because this wasn't the script that you necessarily would invite your sort of Aunt Martha to read.
Gus was inspired by Chimes at Midnight, definitely, and that was always part of the conception. You know, he always acknowledged that one of the central ideas of the film was the parallel between the world of Henry IV and the Portland street world, and the idea being that this sort of story is timeless, you know, that there have always been these street kids and these magnetic figures who organize them and create an alternate life, and they're in conflict with the respectable world.
Without verbalizing it, without sort of wallowing in what it means, I could always feel that Gus was very in touch with each end of these poles. The street life and the Shakespeare life, and the way there was a street life in Shakespeare, and the way there was a nobility in the streets of Portland, that was always sort of seething under the surface of Gus. So he didn't have to say anything, but but I could feel it, and everything he put out referred to that. The point of this movie was not to make that world look sleazy or to find the sleaziness in that world. The point of this movie was to find the amusement of that world, to find what you do with your mind and your buddies when you live there. What do you think about? What do you laugh about? How do you get through the day?
The fact that this film didn't follow the script at all, or at least only in a very sketchy way. You know, the actors really used the script as a jumping off point, and it's to Gus's credit that he was comfortable enough to let them do it, because they did a lot of brilliant stuff that they were sort of inspired to do by the script.
The cruel part of filmmaking for actors is that they show up at 6 in the morning and then you're rehearsing for maybe an hour, and then they go away and everybody lights and gets the camera set up, and you know, after you've discussed the coverage, and you know, everything kind of comes from this process of the actors you know, not having enough time to rehearse. It's not like a play where you can go and you can really scrutinize everything and analyze everything and tear it apart, and you really have to just go. You know, it came down to Gus's vision, and Gus being able to work alone, and Gus being able to delay a lot of his decisions until the moment that we're on the set and figuring it out. You know, like, how do you block a scene? How do you cover a scene? And Gus tends to work very directly. You know, his work was very, very simple.
How are you most expressive with the sets or with the costumes or with the colors? That was all welcome conversation.
Gus had been trusted at this point to do something worthwhile, and people were sort of allowing him to do what he wanted to do. I don't think I'll ever experience that kind of freedom again in filmmaking, you know, to where you're really just having communication with the director, and you're just purely, you know, thrown into this world that's completely of our own invention, of Gus's own invention, and you know, that feeling, I've probably never felt that singular feeling so strongly in any other film I've ever done.
It was just the extraordinary circumstance of him emerging after the success of Drugstore Cowboy and remaining true to his desire to work in Portland, to work on his own terms, to sort of form his own little core of activity there, you know, rather than trying to build his career up in Hollywood terms and playing it their way. You know, he used the opportunity of his success with Drugstore Cowboy to go and do something that he really wanted to do.
I have no question that spending time with Gus lured me into a Gus vision of the world. He was not explicit. He didn't verbalize the things that he liked, but he would point to them. And he would point here, and you'd see this fucked up face in the landscape. And he would point there, and you would see this relationship of this sort of be made in Portland. This film had to be made in Portland. Drugstore Cowboy had to be made in Portland, and I actually didn't get that out of the starting gate. Portland is Gus's window on the world. He sees the world through the lens of Portland. As we scouted locations, I began to see that there were things that Gus desperately, desperately wanted in this hotel. And really, it was a very sort of central space. It was the world within the world that reflected everything else. And somewhere along the way, I realized that there was no one location that would do it all, nor did we have the money to build the right things into any single location. And knowing that it would have a production penalty for moving the company and breaking up the continuity of the scenes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I was hesitant to push the idea of splitting it into maybe more than one place or maybe more than two places. But Gus actually didn't have any problem with that at all.
This whole panorama of street kids and, you know, a view of life on the streets in Portland. But River really made it his own, and it was so overwhelming that I think the film went in the direction that it ultimately did for the better.
River's presence was very important in the making of the movie because he was so engaged with the effort. I mean, he cared about the story, he cared about the group of us making the story, and he cared about getting it right. He was quite obsessive about getting this movie right. And early on, when a new draft of the script came out and it was time for him to sort of get on top of his lines, all he wanted to do was read his character out loud back and forth with somebody else. And he wanted to go through it again and again until it sort of sunk into his DNA. He felt that movie in every possible way, and I've rarely experienced such a level of engagement with the broadest sense of the filmmaking as I did with River.
I think River went to a place where he'd never gone before as an actor. And he was playing in a role. I think these roles were very risky for Keanu and for River, in that they were gay hustlers, and it was a very, the material was very risky. It was material that really hadn't been covered. I mean, that's one of the things that was magical about this film, is that we were doing something that we felt we'd never done before. I think we all knew that. We all sensed that, although you never know what the outcome of a movie is.
Close to you.
It was a very important scene for Gus. I mean, it's a pivotal scene in the script, but it was very important to Gus that he get it right. I think that he saw that as the kind of apex of the Mike and Scott relationship, and that is where he felt like he had to push those two actors to the absolute limit, and he wanted a controlled space for it. So we contrived this scheme where we would paint a backing and plant in it a little bit of background twinkly light and build a desert landscape in front of it and have a bit of a horizon line across the bottom. We put it all together in a stinky old warehouse, and we could have more than a normal shooting day to do the scene.
The campfire scene was really tricky because number one, Gus wanted the set to be clear of all people. He really wanted to do this alone, with just the camera and the actors. And so, lighting-wise, I had to set up something that was sort of universal. The cyclorama on the stage, it was one of those sort of cove things, and I just gave a glow to the sky, and then for the boys in front of the fire, there was just a little tiny bit of sort of just suggested moonlight.
That what you don't understand about a director actually could be very important and very fruitful territory. And I try to understand everything, but I learned from Gus that even if you cannot understand it, it may be beyond understanding and still very, very important to the work that you have to do. There's something in there about respecting the unknown mental processes that I think has equipped me better for all of the films I've done since.
The impressive thing about Gus on all the movies that I worked on with him was that he was happy to have everybody contribute their ideas, and he welcomed it, and he never tried to put himself up as the only one who got to have any fun. That's not to say that he wasn't in charge. He certainly was. But I think that he was a director in the true sense of that word, that he directed everyone in a certain way so that we understood where we were going. And yet everybody else then with that framework was able to bring their own ideas, their own inspirations. Everyone was having fun. And I think that made it really exciting to come to work every day.
We captured a moment, we captured a vision of Gus's, and it was something that was delicate, ephemeral. We got it on film, and it's there. It's there as a record.
Because when you're making a film, you have no idea if anyone's going to like it, if it's going to cut together, if it's going to make sense, if it's going to be anything, or if it's just going to be rubbish. You don't know. You don't know if you're golden or if you're wearing clown shoes. You just don't know. And so, after the editing and after, well, really now in retrospect, after all this time, and what Idaho has gone through critically and in terms of making money and all that, it's like now I can look back and be pretty proud of what a historic thing it was to do.